Hello and welcome to It's Your Funeral, where we ask celebrity guests what they want their final send-off to be like. Now this week I'm talking to a woman who first found fame in the 80s as a Britpop punk goddess. As an actress, she made her mark in such films as Quadrophenia, and more recently she has mellowed, we hope, into a popular television presenter and alternative health enthusiast. Toyah Willcox, I have to say, it's your funeral. And I also have to
not
say...
something I want to think about too much.
Is it not?
Well, I think you do think about it, but you don't dwell on it, do you?
No.
I think some people don't think about death at all, and I think that's a huge mistake, and it's interesting to kind of confront what a funeral is.
So would you think about death before you would actually think of the funeral?
Oh, totally, yes, because death's going to last longer than the funeral. And also, I've always believed that life is attaining to whatever happens that moment after death. You know, that life is a journey to that moment. I've never thought, hey, wow, this is it, 80 years of fun. I've always had that kind of Eastern philosophy that the whole of your lifespan is a growing curve.
And are you as excited about what comes after as you are in the moment?
As it grows closer, no. I always said it in my 20s, but yeah, I can't wait to die. It's the biggest adventure of all. But now, as it does grow closer, I'm completely frustrated by the lack of time. Because as you grow older, you're more ready to live. I'm finding that with age comes a wisdom, therefore comes the ability to confront and face the world in a way that you couldn't when you were 20. So that's really frustrating.
So it's getting better for you, is it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
As regards your funeral, I mean, I have to say, with the possible exception of one other guest on this series, your plan is the most mind-blowing imaginable. It really is. So I'm going to leave it to you to give it a name and tell us what it entails.
I would love a sky burial. A sky burial is a Tibetan tradition of how you dispose of a holy man's body. It's carried out in secret. Society, women, communities are not allowed to see sky burials, and the body is taken up by the elders onto a mountain somewhere in Tibet. It's a Buddhist practice. And then the elders, the males of the village, dismember the body, and it's quite gruesome. They hack it apart, and then they pommel bits of the body with a brick, well, not a brick, but a boulder or a stone. Mix it with flour, and then they feed it to the vultures. It's the highest, most sacred burial you can have in Tibetan culture. And the idea is that you're returning the body, the flesh, back into the cycle of life on earth, and you're placing the soul up into a higher sphere. But I love the idea of, say, my father and my husband, and I would like to go before they do because they're so precious to me.
Before both of them?
Yeah, I would,
Your
very
father
much.
too?
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's against the natural cycle if we're talking about natural, you know, returning to the earth.
Well, you know, things can happen. I'm not a safe driver. But I love the idea of, say, the Malvern Hills. As a child, I grew up with the Malvern Hills as this beautiful view. I read Lord of the Rings and always thought it was about the Malvern Hills. I studied Elgar for my music O-level, and that Elgar wrote the variations within the view of the Malvern Hills. So say there's a sacred quiet spot on the Malvern Hills, and my father and my husband could have my body delivered there, and they could, if they could stomach it, take the body apart, pommel it, feed it to the pigeons, or some kind of imported vultures. And then below there's this kind of wonderful wake going on.
Well, we'll talk about the wake in a minute, but I mean, you used the phrase, if they could stomach it. I mean, have you discussed this with your father and your husband? I mean,
Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism I've discussed with my father all my life. My father explored Hinduism and Buddhism when he was a sailor in the war, and he was in the Middle East. So those ideas would not be at all gruesome to him. I think it would be more upsetting that his daughter has asked him to do that. But my father had extraordinary experiences in the war, so I think he could face it. As for my husband, I think he'd do anything I'd ask him, to be honest. So it's a selfish thing to ask, but I think it's also a very privileged thing to ask. And it's this thing about the flesh. I was brought up to be afraid of cultures that ate flesh or practiced cannibalism. Yet when you examine cannibalism, it's about consuming the spirit. It's the continuation of the spirit. It's the greatest mark of respect to eat someone's flesh in those cultures. And with the Tibetan culture, to actually take the flesh away, to destroy the person, to destroy the anchor that holds the spirit in the physical world, is the greatest act of love that you could perform.
You're obviously educated about these cultures. Do you have a fascination with them?
Oh yeah, totally.
Where does that come from?
Because I'm so frustrated by Western cultures. I was brought up a Christian. I think the basic message of Christianity is absolutely fine, but the taboos with death just drive me mad with frustration. We are saying on one hand, we're Christians, we believe in life after death, and on the other, we're saying, oh no, don't destroy our memory, don't destroy our physical body. We live in fear of dying, and I just find that polarization completely maddening.
But death is scary.
Well, of course it is. It's the biggest adventure we'll ever have, and it's the biggest act of trust we ever have to consciously travel through.
Are you scared of it?
I'm scared of the process. Because even in Tibetan culture, where wise men have died and believe they've died many times, death is not easy. They say within the culture that when you die, you relive your life, and then after a period of days, you relive your death, and that's very painful. Then after something like 49 days, you start to relive your death tenfold. So the pain and the emotional content of your life concentrates, and by that you find the essence of what your soul is. So death is, in a way, probably the most testing, awful thing, and yet the most liberating thing we can go through. And the reason we go through it is it prepares the soul for the next life.
So do you believe that will happen to you?
I never believed in reincarnation, purely because I can't bear the thought of coming back here. If someone said, okay, you've got a choice, have nothing or come back here and go through that education system again, I think I'd go for nothing. I loathe the structure of the society I've been brought up in. I loathe it with a vengeance.
Well, how do you find happiness in it, or don't you?
Happiness for me is in being creative. It's in writing, or having creative thought, or even something as small as breaking an old habit.
Let's go back to your funeral. We've got the process of you being chopped up and fed back to the earth, hopefully by your father and your husband. Is there going to be some kind of, and this is in the Malvern Hills,
Yes.
Is there going to be some kind of ceremony to accompany this?
Yes, I'd like the cutting up and disposing of the body to be away from view, away from eyes, because I don't want pity and I don't want horror, and I just want it to be one with nature. But down the bottom of the hill there would be, say, some huge tents with a wonderful ceremony going on with all my heroes and heroines in the world attending. I've never met David Bowie. Well, I've been in a room with him, and I'll never work with him. But I would like him to carry a flame, and to carry that flame and light an eternal flame in memory of me. And I would like an orchestra there playing my favourite music. And all my heroes like Peter Gabriel, Billy Whitelaw, Dawn French, everyone who I've ever admired in my work, who I don't really know, but I would just like them there. And there's an image that I'd like remembered of me more than anything, and it was an image from a song I did called Brave New World, where my face is painted in birds. And I would just like an enormous, dominating print of that, almost at the altar, just, you know, so people can say goodbye. Very egotistical.
So that stage in your life where you had these dramatic images, and in fact you said at the ceremony in the Malvern Hills you will have this massive visual image of yourself, sort of in the early 80s, yeah?
Yes.
When you looked so dramatic. Was that a cathartic process for you? I mean, did you manage to burst through something?
Yes, all those images were based, and we're talking about 20 years ago now, when you weren't allowed to look different, when punk evolved. It extraordinary time for women, because suddenly you could wear anything and still be seen as an intelligent human being. And the whole point of the face painting that I went through as a pop singer was to try and express how I was feeling internally and wear it externally, rather than try and hide it. Now, I was brought up middle class, and it's often been said, and it's a bit of a cliche, that the middle class are particularly good at hiding things. And it's probably because I was brought up to hide everything I felt that I naturally was, that I just had to kind of expel it all, or kind of wear my heart on my sleeve in some way.
The music that you mentioned, Elgar, would he feature?
Yes.
His music feature, yeah.
Well, yes, he would. Elgar was madly in love with his wife, and the majority of music he wrote was usually, from what I believe by the history books, was in a state of tears over his wife. And one piece was called Nimrod, and he was so in love with her that all that emotion kind of transcribed into the music. And I just think that would be very, very fitting.
Okay. Well, if you think it's fitting, as you say, this is your fancy, it's your funeral, so we have done this for you. We have got a rendition of Elgar's Nimrod by our own string quartet, Sigma. So let's listen to that now. Send-off. It's certainly proving to be so far. We've had a Tibetan sky funeral where your body is hacked up and fed to the birds, and then this fantastic ceremony down below in the Malvern Hills where all your heroes, David Bowie, Don French, and everyone is there.
And made to suffer.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you yourself said that this is a funeral which is normally afforded to very holy people, and you were loath to sort of put yourself in that category, really, but it does seem the funeral of a special person. Do you regard yourself as a special person?
It's not that I regard myself as a special person. I think funerals should be special. I think people don't spend enough time. I think a funeral should be like a wedding. It should be joyous. It should be really brilliantly contemplated. It should be an expression of everyone's love and everyone's memory towards that person. And I'd like a funeral where everyone who knows me is involved on a certain level, rather than coming and seeing a priest or a vicar who never knew me kind of run through my CV and then say, right, stick her in the ground. I just think a funeral should be very creative.
Is it for the person who's gone, or is it for the person who left behind in your mind?
Well, the one I've created today is definitely for me. But I think it should be, in a way, it's a form of closure, so it should be as much for everyone left behind. And it should also be a bridge, because I do actually believe there is eternal existence. I don't believe a soul can ever die. Well, it can, but you have to work really hard at it. And therefore, the funeral is the bridge between the living and the person who's passed into the next realm. So it's for both.
Right. Will there be any readings at the funeral?
Yes, there's a poem that I read at my mother-in-law's funeral, which it was very hard to read. The vicar actually asked me to read it, and it's called I Am Not Gone, and it's by Miss DJ. And it's stunning. Only a woman could have written it. It's full of love, and it evokes the feeling of eternal life without the pretentiousness and the elitism that religion can sometimes have.
Would
Do you want to hear a bit?
Perhaps.
Okay. I am not gone. I am part of forever. In every season, every bird song, in flowers, clouds, and each rainbow. I am part of them. They are part of me. Do not grieve, only remember.
So where do you think you will go? I mean, you've said the funeral's a transition between this life and some other dimension. What is that? Can you describe that at all?
Well, what I believe at present, and my belief always shifts as I learn more, is that the really holy people don't have to come back. They can stay in a kind of state of nirvana. The reason we come back is we have something to address. We have something to learn.
Do you think you will need to come back then, or have you...
I really don't want to come back at all. I can't even bear thinking about it. If I did, I'd like to come back a man.
It's quite sad that you say that.
Well, I'd like to come back a man, and I'd like to sin forever. On one level, I think being a woman has been great, but I'm fed up of culture and men telling me that I'm
really
second
feel
class.
oppressed by it?
I think if people reflect negativity on you enough, you do feel oppressed by it, yes.
So what have you felt?
I didn't like my growing up, my being a child, having femininity forced upon me. I'd rather have been genderless. I didn't want it presumed that because I was a girl I'd like to wear dresses and have dolls. I loathe all that role-playing.
So are there still things then that you are wrestling? I mean, are there particular things that you want to deal with in yourself?
Oh yeah, all the time, yes.
Some of them.
Creative issues, really. I believe we're all born with incredible potential, but none of us, or some of us, don't have the drive throughout life to reach that potential, because you actually have to remain almost in a state of pain, emotional pain, to reach those highest creative levels. And I'm talking here about ambition and you know, people that are insomniacs because all they can think about it is being creative, and they suffer for that creativity. Part of me would love to still be a great singer, a great writer and a great actress, but part of me resists facing the pain that you have to achieve that.
What about on a personal level, or are the two indistinguishable for you?
For me, they're indistinguishable.
How important is it to you that you are remembered?
I think being remembered is incredibly important. Again, it's a slightly ego thing, but if you're not remembered, then you haven't changed anything in your lifetime, and change can be very subtle. So I think it's very sad to be forgotten because no one saw what you gave to others, or what your presence kind of helped the ongoing growth of generations.
So how would you like to be remembered then?
Oh, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue at all.
But you think so much about everything, you've got to know.
What would I like to be remembered for? I'd like to write a book that makes people think. Now, most books make you think, but there's a book that I'd like to write and have the technicality to write, the technical ability to write, that wakes the soul up. Because sometimes, theoretically, souls don't like to be woken up. They're more comfortable sleeping.
It's such a massive ambition, and hopefully...
I'll never achieve it.
Hopefully you'll fulfill it. I mean, because somebody has to, but I'm thinking more of... I'm going back to the service in the Malvern Hills and thinking of your husband, if he is there standing up, or your father, if in fact you predecease him. And what will they say about Toyah?
My father will laugh his head off and think, thank God she's gone.
He won't.
What will my father say about me? He's always thought that I think too much, and he's always been very upset that I'm obviously not happy being a woman. And he feels some kind of responsibility towards that. So I think he'd be very happy for me that if I had a sky burial, I've at least had something I want. And as for Robert, I don't know what he'd think, really. He'd probably think, oh, at last, I can have some peace.
You don't believe that, do you?
I don't know. I can't answer for them. I don't know.
You can't think, you can't fill in the blank. Toyah was.
Toyah was. No, the one thing I often think, and this is another, see, this is my favourite subject, this is why I know so much on it, that theoretically, when you pass over, you face God, you face your God, and the big question is, what have you contributed in my name? And I've been thinking and contemplating on this one a lot lately. What have I contributed in God's name? Because everything I've done has been an act of the self. You know, it's kind of, I want this, I want that, I want to do that. So what have I done in God's name? And I can't answer it. Cannot answer it.
Well, hopefully you've got some time left.
Hopefully, yeah.
Is it something you would address yourself to?
I think about it, yeah, I think about it often. I think it's a very good question because it's the most unselfish question that you can be asked.
I haven't quite worked out yet, and I doubt very much whether I will work out in the confines of this, whether you are happy in this life. But once you have gone to whatever, is there anything you will miss about this life?
Performing. And the only time I'm really happy is when I'm performing.
Yeah.
The stage has been my church. Whether it's acting, singing, presenting, there's a very unique focus about it. I've often felt when you're on stage acting in a play, if you've got it right, there's a moment when the whole audience is one mind, and you can feel it. Your skin starts tingling, everything changes. And that's such an extraordinary feeling, but nothing can replace it.
The cod psychologist would say that's because you're not happy being you, sitting in a dark room.
Well, obviously, if I'm an actress. I mean, yeah, you're right. I think, it's very hard being one person. Very hard.
I don't think you ever have been, have you?
No.
How's the ceremony drawing to a close?
By this time, I've got David Bowie, Peter Gabriel, Dawn French and Billy Whitelaw chained to the altar, and I own them.
I definitely want an invite to this, I tell you.
And I've made them witness a kind of condensed version of my life. How would it end? I think it has to go out with a 40-piece orchestra playing I Want to Be Free. And people can join in karaoke style if they want.
And that's the end of the day?
Oh no, they've got to go away, get extremely drunk and overeat, and all my favourite foods will be there, just to be selfish. All foods from different cultures, from Turkey and India and China and Japan. There'd have to be a feast.
How do you think this day would make people feel, the people who were there?
I would like them to feel confused, actually. And I'd also like them to think about their own funerals and the conclusions of their own life, and to realise that everything doesn't have to be in a compartment or a little box.
And an epitaph?
Oh, I've always said my epitaph should be, she came, she lisped, she went.
I don't think you could get anything better, actually. Well, Toyah, thanks so much for sharing your funeral with us. It has been utterly fascinating, and all of your other thoughts surrounding it. We are going to play that little request for you. You want to finish the ceremony with a rendition of I Want to Be Free. So we have asked our Windwood Trio to do that for you. So here you are. It's all for you.
Great.